everyone, my name is Cynthia and let's talk books. Actually, today I want to talk about one very specific book. The Missing of Clairedelune by Clairedelune. This is book number 2 in the Mirror Visitor series. I read book number 1 in 2019 and enjoyed parts of it, mostly like the fantasy world that Dabo created in that book just really intrigued me. And so book number 2 was in my Reading the French Classics series, with the word classics used very loosely because this is a very kind of recent release. It's been a bestseller all over the world, and the whole series has a lot of fans. So book number 2 is out in English, and I'm going to do this review in parts. This first part, there will be no spoilers, none whatsoever, nothing that could possibly be classified as a spoiler. But in the second part of the review, I'm going to get a little spoilery. I'm actually not going to reveal any big spoilers, but there's certain plot points or characteristics within the book that I need to talk about. But I'll make sure and note before I get into that section so that anybody that is sensitive to spoilers doesn't get spoiled by me. This is a story of court intrigue. At least that's how the first one and most of the second one really read to me. If you are familiar with the story, it is about a young girl who is engaged to be married. She engaged to somebody that lives in a different arc. In this fantasy world, the world has been split into arcs, so these different worlds in which each one has a family spirit, and all of the humans that are in that world are descendants from these different family spirits, right? So in the world that our heroine is from, it's a very peaceful, very tranquil world. She has a couple of different powers. The first power she has is she can travel through mirrors. Very handy power, and one that now I'm like, I wish I kind of had. But her other power is that she can read objects. So just by touching a book, she can kind of read the imprint that people have left on the object through its entire history. So like if there's strong emotions attached to it, things like that, she can read that, she can feel that. And that is a power that her fiance, it turns out, is very interested in. Her fiance comes from a different arc, and it's a much more cold, kind of more brutal kind of world where there's different kinds of clan type families that are all like in competition with one another at this kind of royal court that the family spirit kind of rules over. That is one of the main themes I got from the series so far, is the theme of like royal intrigue, which I think Dabo is very clearly like connecting back to the French monarchy, especially Louis XIV, XV, and XVI. Those monarchies. Well, Louis XIV is the epitome of the absolute monarch, right? The state is I, l'état c'est moi was his line, and actually the line is kind of sort of used in this book. So that's where I was like, in this book there's no like beating around the bush. It's the monarchy that she is alluding to here, but also the way that the courtiers, the way the court works, right? In order to have a standing within the court, you have to have something interesting about you, an interesting power, an interesting personality, something. That's how the French monarchies worked towards the end of their existence, is that talent wasn't necessarily important unless your talent like could serve a purpose for somebody. Learning how to tell jokes, how to converse, how to attract attention and guide conversation were really useful skills. So if you were quiet, introspective, you were just not going to get anywhere in this monarchy. And that is a similar kind of dynamic that you have in the Mirror Visitor series, at least in our main character's Ophelia's kind of fiance's arc, right? So that is one thing where like it directly connected to French history to me. And while I enjoyed some of it in the first book, I felt like those elements of like court intrigue were actually much more fun and interesting in The Missing of Clairedelune. And I also, part of it was because Ophelia develops as a character. And in book one, she's very much a pushover. So that is one of the things that, one of the themes of the second book is the character development of Ophelia, right? She starts becoming her own advocate rather than relying on other people to like speak or act on her behalf. And I really, really enjoyed seeing that here. We also start getting the answers to some of the questions and the mysteries established in the first book. That part of it felt very satisfying in the second book, and in a long-running series, you need some of that. So this book is over 500 pages, but it's also very easy to read. The language in which it is, at least translated, it made it a super fast read. I read this in 2 days. Or 3 days? 2 to 3 days. Granted, I was sick, so I was home all day with like the time to invest in it. At the same time, even though I was sick and not feeling well, like I could read it and understand everything that was happening. At no point did I feel like, I didn't have the mental capacity to engage with the story as it was written. So those are all kind of good points for it. This is something where like not all fantasy stories can be this accessible in terms of language. On the other hand, it can be a problem. This is a high fantasy series written in an almost like middle grade language. And this is where like I've seen other reviewers talk about how there's something that doesn't quite fit here. This is actually a YA series written in a language that's kind of a little bit lower than YA, but engaging in themes that are very adult. So for me, it was hard to categorize this when I was first reading it. I'm like, wait, is this YA? No, I think this is an adult series. I'm like, but it's written in a very accessible way. I don't fault it for the language and the style it's written in, because that made reading a 500 plus page book easy. But I can see why people have issues on like how to classify it and who to recommend the book to. Right. All right, I want to pause here. If you're not into spoilers, I'm going to get into some, gray area with spoilers. I'm actually not going to spoil anything big, but one of the things that's different in this book from the first volume is that you get these chapters in here that are fragments. They're memory fragments that from a family spirit. I don't think that's a spoiler because the very first page of the story is that it's a fragment. And you get those at different points throughout the story. That's different than in book one, and it gives the book a very different tone. In book one, now clearly having read book two, it was a lot of setup. This, by putting these fragments from like the family spirits before like the rest of humanity existed, gives it a very different tone and a very different theme. Like clearly the author wants us to think more about the family spirits and where they came from. I didn't enjoy that because what I liked most about this book was the court intrigue, backstabbing, political, social dynamics in it. And so these sections, going back to the family spirits, felt out of place with what I was liking in the story. On the other hand, you need these fragments, these chapters that take you back to the family spirits are important. But they're not important until you get to 60% of the way through, and then it becomes very clear that you're dealing with a bigger story than you originally thought. So that's one of my main problems with it, because at some point I was reading this, and as soon as I was getting to the fragments, I realized that a lot of the things that were important in book one and were important for most of book two were actually not going to be important. I was like, oh, there's a question of who's doing this, who's in control of that, what's going to happen with Ophelia. And I'm like, at the end, I just knew those are like red herrings. They're not going to be important plot points. Because clearly the author wants us to think about the family spirits. In that case, then, what the ambassador is doing, what the minister of this or the minister of that is doing is not going to be important. And yet, we're spending pages and pages going into the dynamics of the ministers and Ophelia, and all this court intrigue stuff. So I felt cheated. Even though I saw it coming, I felt cheated with the turn the book takes 60% of the way through. So this is about 300 pages into the story. That means that over half the book, right, plot that turns out to not be key. It's not useless plot, but the story shifts and becomes a different kind of story and takes on a very different tone. And this is where I can't spoil things. I am not going to spoil it, but I didn't like it. And it's not, the tone and the focus in the last part of the book was not a cup of tea. At least not something that I'm currently interested in. It's just going into themes that I'm like, I can take them or leave them. Mostly I can leave them. And that's a problem for me in terms of continuing to invest in a long series. I feel invested in Ophelia. I care what happens to her. I kind of want to know what's going to happen. So I thought about like going in and reading spoilers for the other books because they've already been released in French. But in terms of like continuing to buy and read the books as they're translated into English, I'm thinking no. Series, I've enjoyed it for what it has been. I'm giving this book 3 out of 5 stars, so it's not that I did not enjoy it. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it's not going to hit my sweet spot, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time and money investing in a series that is not going to be great for me. So who is this book for? I think if you are interested in a fantasy series with a lot of questions, actually when I was kind of trying to wrap my head around this book, I kept thinking to the TV series Lost, where a lot of people felt really dissatisfied with the ending. And I feel like that's what the series is going to be for me, where like questions get answered and then more questions get asked, and then at the end you're going to feel cheated. That's what I feel where the story's taking me. But I think if you like that, if you like lots of questions and lots of layers to mysteries and to similar kinds of questions to the questions Lost was asking, you might like this book. So there we go. That is my review and thoughts on book 2 of the Mirror Visitors series, The Missing of Clairedelune. But let me know what you think, because that's part of the fun here, is everybody kind of reading some of the same material and kind of experiencing it differently. So I love to hear what other people are experiencing and thinking about it. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you feel like it, don't forget to subscribe. I'm most active on Instagram and Goodreads. All that information is down below. See you in the next one.